Good evening, everyone. My name is Ben Brandon, Transbay Development Specialist with OCII, and I'd like to welcome you and thank you for participating in the second community meeting for the Transbay Block 3 Park Project. We're going to get started now. Next slide, Lizzie. Okay. One first announcement, we are recording tonight's webinar and we will make it available to the public following the meeting. At the end of the meeting, we'll provide a web link where you can access the recording. Let me begin with an overview of tonight's program. I will provide a quick introduction and overview, turn the presentation over to Lizzie Hirsch, who is the project's design lead from San Francisco Public Works. Lizzie will take us through the bulk of tonight's presentation, and following that, we'll open things up for a question and answer session and take feedback. Finally, I'll wrap up with an overview of the project's schedule and cover the next steps. Lizzie, next slide, please. Alrighty. The delivery of this new park is a joint effort between the Office of Community Investment and Infrastructure, or OCII, San Francisco Recreation and Parks, and San Francisco Public Works, and we have representation from all of our agencies here tonight. OCII is the former San Francisco Redevelopment Agency. We oversee the implementation of the Transbay Redevelopment Plan, of which this park is a key element. We are also financing the park's development. San Francisco Recreation and Parks will ultimately own and manage the park with management support from the East Cut Community Benefits District. Finally, San Francisco Public Works is the landscape designer of the park, and their agency will also oversee construction of it when we get to that point. During the presentation tonight, the only speakers you will hear are Kathleen O'Day with Public Works, Lizzie Hirsch with Public Works, and myself. During the question and answer session, the other city staff shown here are available to field questions along with Kathleen, Lizzie, and I. Next slide. Now let me explain how all of you can provide your feedback during the presentation. At the bottom of your Zoom meeting window, there is a Q&A button that you can click on at any time and submit a question or a comment. Following Lizzie's presentation, questions will be read aloud for all of you to hear and then answered by city staff. Any questions that we do not get to tonight will be answered and posted to the project website following the meeting. And at the end of this presentation, we will provide a link to that website. Finally, we ask that during the presentation, you all keep an open mind about the three concepts for the park and other people's opinions. Lastly, right when we close the meeting, you'll have an opportunity to immediately provide feedback by answering a survey with questions about the three concepts we'll show you tonight. When the meeting ends, the Zoom window will close, but your web browser should open up to a page to access the survey. If you'd prefer to think about the concept some more before completing the survey, you can access it later either at the project website or through the East Cut CBD's website. Next slide, Lizzie. Now we're going to ask you all a poll, ask you a two-question poll. The poll should pop up on your screen right now, and I'll wait a short time for you all to respond, and then Lizzie will announce the results at the beginning of her presentation. So I'll hold on a moment and let you all respond. And then Lizzie, why don't we go to the next slide now, if that's okay.
Okay, just a second. Sorry, having little technical difficulties. We'll get there. Here we go.
There we go. Thanks, Lizzie. Alrighty. The ultimate design of this park relies on the intersection of three values: comprehensive community outreach, creating a place-based design focused on feedback from neighborhood residents, workers, and visitors, and delivering a park that responds to changes in our climate. The community outreach process began earlier this year. We hosted community meeting 1 this past March. We're here tonight to unveil the three concepts the design team has developed for the park and seek your feedback. And then we're aiming to take this feedback, refine the design into one final concept, and present that at community meeting 3 later this fall. And with that, I'm going to turn things over to Lizzie Hirsch, our design lead for the project. Lizzie, take it away.
Thank you, Ben. Good evening. I'm waiting for the poll results. Here we go. Did you attend community meeting 1? No, 63%. Okay, so we have quite a few newcomers. And do you live or work nearby? 90% basically. So welcome to those newcomers, and we're going to move on. I again am dealing with a technical difficulty. It's not moving, and we will proceed ahead. So since a significant amount of folks did not attend the community meeting 1, I'm going to go through a little background knowledge. And first of all, I want to thank you all for participating. We really are looking forward to getting your feedback. And it's, you know, we want you to take some time. This is a new mode of presenting for all of us, including myself. So this is a lot of information. So please take your time. And if at the end you don't feel ready to commit to anything, take your time in the next 2 weeks. So let's get off to the presentation. So the site itself is located in the northeast side of San Francisco. And this is the blow up of the site itself. You can see it's the former temp terminal site. And the block 3, our park, is about 1 acre that is framed by 2 high density residential units. This is the temp terminal site today, as you know it. And this is a future view of block 4 here to the north with town houses here, framed by 2 alleyways, Clementina and Tahama, the park itself, and then affordable housing unit to the south. In preparation for the community meeting 1, East Cut CBD kindly helped us with a survey over a year ago, and then we asked the same information at community 1. We got over 560 respondents, and of the respondents, 85% were from the area, 71% lived within a couple minutes away, and 65 was 2-person home, and then we have a quarter percent that have dogs and 20% that have children. As far as the wish list, what do you want to see in this park? Interestingly enough, there is a majority of folks that really are looking for relaxation and green space. Those are the 2 primary asks. And then we have secondary interests, things like walking dogs, exercise, play, would like to see public art, some food, farmers markets. Those are sort of secondary needs. And during the community meeting 1, we showed some inspiration boards of potential park character, park seating, play in the park, and then cultural amenities that you might consider. And from that, you know, we got responses in 3 categories. The yellow dot indicates a desire of, yes, absolutely love it. We did get mixed results in this column. And then there are ones with heavily red dots, which is we call the no thanks column. And what you'll see in terms of the park character is very much things feel natural and green. That's kind of the big message. And then as far as cultural amenities, there was a lot of interest in a lot of different things. You know, the interest in a library sharing model, picnicking with your community, movie night, art, exercise opportunity. So this actually, there was a lot of interest in a lot of areas. Additionally, we asked whether you wanted to see a restroom in the park. Now, clearly, there were more people in the yes column. We showed a couple of different prototypes. The one that actually stood out with the most yellow was the Deco, which is a citywide bathroom system that actually sits on the street right of way, so it wouldn't actually be in the park. This is actually a space-saving option. So, and we can talk further about this later. So now we're going to go into the analysis of the site and neighborhood. So as we start defining what happens in Block 3 here, it's very important to understand the framework of other green space. So Rincon Park itself is an open space with a dog area. Under Ramp Park is a future planned park that's highly programmed that includes courts, dog run, athletic, fitness, and as well as a beer garden. And then of course there's the elevated Salesforce Park that offers a bunch of different wide amenities. So in defining the program, our criteria was that we should provide programs that aren't available at the adjacent neighboring parks. Plus, given its key location nestled into this residential hub, we felt it would be a very community-based project. So it would include a kids play area, passive recreation, because that's what we heard from you, as well as flexible programming, giving you latitude of how you want to use the space. So as we started to start designing, we felt we needed to clarify, we needed to make sure we had all these different kind of spaces. So for the large scale spaces, it's a flexible use for more larger community gatherings, exercise. For the medium scale places, it's for small community picnic gatherings. And then of course the seating areas for individual reflection. And then the play area we determined should be about 4,000 square feet, which is a little more than the South Park that was just built, playground. And just for reference point, how big is, Trans Bay? Well, Union Square is double the size of Trans Bay. So this is a Trans Bay Park on the plaza. Huntington Park actually fits exactly what Trans Bay Block 3 Park is. And then South Park is similar size, but different configuration. And then, parks are reflections of our values and history. And so we're using Washington Square Park as kind of an example of how parks change over time based on social values. So at its inception, Washington Square Park was very much a simple circulation park, getting to and fro from places. But over time, there was a need to really bring more greenery, and this notion of a big grassy green lawn with lots of trees became, of the time in the 50s. We are in a different era, and neither of these two models really fit the key. We now, as you all know, we're very much have to think about climate change, sustainability, and really what the neighborhood needs. Over that layer is also the site history itself. So we went into quite a bit of detail in the Community 1 to talk a little bit about the history of the site. And as you can see, it's gone from a wetland intertidal zone to a densely urban site. And we feel that one of these, we should really reflect that aspect of the site, to reflect back to that it's part of the edge of the water. Finally, we're going to go into the site itself. The park is served by great pedestrian access that's shown in this orange. There is future two-way bike lane along Beale and Main. It's framed by these two alleyways. And then again, these dense high-end mixed residential of Block 4 with a retail space at the corner here. Block 2 is an affordable housing complex with a child care center on this edge. And then, as you can see, suggested are these links within the complexes that are continued open space links that we feel is a key component of the park. Finally, the sun. This is a year-round sun corner, and we'll later go into more of the sun studies. I just need a break for some water, excuse me. So as Ben mentioned, we came up with 3 design concepts, and we challenged ourselves truly to try to come up with 3 very distinct ones as a basis to really create dialogue and really draw out preferences. These are not finished products, these are beginnings. So the first one we call the clearing, the second is the commons, and the third is the ripple. So I'm going to go through each plan and design. So you'll see a plan at the center, a section and elevation of the park, and then a diagram of the programming spaces. So in the clearing, as the name suggests, is this notion of a space that clears open from like a clearing in the forest. And at its center is a meadow that is gradually sloped with a deck at top for a small gathering space. And the edges are very much sort of wooded, vegetated, very to draw in lots of habitat and ecology. And so the other thing to note is we very much allowed the linkage to occur between the 2 housing complexes. The western corner is held by the playground. There's these ancillary spaces for picnicking, and you very much you can evolve and sort of circulate throughout the park in a very circuitous route. You can see in the section, the meadow is very much framed by this wonderful varied tree forest of sorts. And then when we get to the program, the big flexible space is at the intersection between the 2 housing complexes. The small group spaces are here in the picnic area and the deck up here on the sun spot. And then throughout the site, you can see there's lots of little areas to sit and reflect. And basically, it's this notion that you can discover this park. The next slide is really a suggestive feeling of the way we're really trying to, this is trying to set the sensibility of the park. So as you can see, it's the sense of being in nature, and the materials themselves are, of natural materials. So the deck out of wood, the walls being of stone, a reflection of the East Cut itself. The paving would take on sort of an organic form. And then the site furnishings also to be of natural wood. The next scheme, the commons, is centered around the notion of an open, flexible plaza, kind of in line with, the piazza or the plaza of either Italian spaces or Spanish type plazas, with the notion that you can really change and bring flexible seating. And it's framed through a series of landscapes that change by the environmental edge. So on the western edge, it's more vegetated and the sense of, going through the woods. And whereas the eastern edge is reusing the existing palms that are now on the site. And this allows very porous edges to actually connect you from the housing complexes here. And then at the center is the playground that is then also shaded by a pergola to offer some relief from the sun as well. Here's a little storage unit that would allow you to put the chairs and tables away at night, and also creates an entrance to the park itself. So you can see in this section here, the change of vegetation from the palm trees that are light and airy and very sunny to the more woodland feel of the west side. The big flexible space is at the center. some of the smaller groups along the curved walls of the east, and then you have the seating around throughout the wooded areas. You can see again, we have recognized this important link as well, this cross link, as well as corner links into the site. So here again, the feeling of the space, this notion of a big plaza that can have flexible seating that is framed by this more woodsy landscape to then the sunny side of the palms, and the addition of shelter from the sun with these pergola, and paving that could take on elements of the original topography of the site, and having these special little seating areas that allow for smaller group gatherings. And again, the reuse of the ponds. The third and final one we call the ripple. This is truly a blend of the two, and it's very much inspired by the original idea of the wetlands, like as if a water had rippled through the site, and emerged from it are these islands of landscape that form the various shapes and program. At the center, again, is this link here, but that it's a flexible paved area that is backed by an elevated lawn. So this merges as two unified spaces. And then you have on the west side, kind of Bryant-like park idea of the trees creating a buffer and providing these seating zones around this framed paving area. The playground is at the east, and then you have these different scaled landscape zones for more intimate seating. Additionally, we're including a pergola that kind of ties all these islands together that, you know, initially the idea is that the landscape takes a while for the landscape to form, so you would have this sense of scale to the site with a pergola as well as immediate shade that you might want. But over time, this structure could actually dissolve with as the vegetation around it grows. And here again, you see the section that shows the trees on the western edge, the pergola to provide scale and shade. And in the program area, the big flexible space is this combined lawn and hardscape. And then the group gatherings right at the heart of the playground, as well as on the backside of the lawn. And then distributed throughout are these more intimate seating zones. So the inspiration of this is, we call this the island design concept, but you can see this notion of the carving out a space through these vegetated islands, the elevated turf, the paved ripples that would actually go across the entire site to connect all the sides, the opportunity of intimate seating, and this contrast of this wonderful grove underneath. And the pergola itself could include these swinging benches. So we're including this playboard mainly to give you a sense of the scale of what could happen in the 4,000 square feet and the kinds of equipment that could be used. However, we feel that until we decide which direction we should go, we're not going to design it until we get a clearer picture of where we're headed with the final design. However, in the next meeting, we'll start talking to you specifically about the elements of the playground. So this next series of slides are really the opportunity to compare the designs. And you'll find that they actually share much of some of the same. The program is the same. Some of the circulation strategies are the same. But what I would say is different are the sensibilities. So in terms of the rationale or where things are similar, the play area always sits on this southern edge as it relates to the childcare. The link between the two key residential buildings is in each of the designs here. They all buffer the west side to some extent because it's the most heavily trafficked and has the bike lane right at the edge. And they each will have this shared, this notion of different scale spaces, as well as this notion of bringing nature into the city, but with slightly different, approaches. The clearing is probably the most, I would say, trying to immerse you in nature. The commons is really the key of the common piazza in which community can gather and make events happen here together. The ripple is this hybrid of merging sort of landscape and paving together, and creating different scaled spaces that you discover through the islands. And here we just compare and contrast the programming. Each of them have the big flexible space. The clearing and the ripple place it in the linkage area. The commons places it right in the sunbelt. Again, these small group spaces, the clearing has these picnic areas and up at the upper deck. The commons in this Kirby zone here. The ripple right at the playground and the backside of the elevated lawn. Again, the playground always sits on the southern edge here, and all of them allow linkages from the corners into the site here, 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 for ease of movement and porosity between the residential units, certainly in the commons and the clearing, and a more circuitous route for the clearing. Key to any design is recognizing the sun patterns of the design, and this is the top row is the morning sun, the middle is the midday sun, and the last one is the afternoon sun. And you'll see that many of the key elements, like for example, the clearing, the sun deck is always in sun, the piazza is always in sun, and in the ripple, this key small gathering right at the playground is always sun. But, we also felt that we wanted to really organize various spaces around the sun, but as you know, sun changes and sometimes you want shade. So I'm going to end with this. This is basically showing each of the schemes with their inspirational images. We feel that these are beginnings and that they are really trying to start a conversation with you. And we want you to ask as many questions as possible. And we feel that any of these schemes really could work. And we just, with your input, we would like to refine them and get them, go deeper with them. But we first just want to get your sense of where you want to head. So with that, I'm going to open it up for the question and answer session. And so we hope you've started to actually ask some of those questions, but here are some key questions I just want to put out there so that you could consider asking them. Is there a design alternative you're most drawn to and why? What park element is most important to you? And is there anything missing you would like to see? And then later on, as Ben mentioned, you can fill out the survey. And with that, I'm going to leave the floor to Kathleen and Ben.
So Ben and Lizzie, great presentation. And so we already have some questions. We have about 11 questions. So I'm going to start the question with Ben. What is the timeline for under ramp?
Great question. We had a feeling that might come up tonight. Under ramp park from OCII's perspective, presently under ramp park is on hold. And the reason for that is that OCII is the let's call it the developer, the sponsor of the park. We have, come up with the schematic design for the park. We will finance its development. But the challenge right now is that the underlying landowner for all of the property that will comprise the future park is the Transway Joint Powers Authority, the TJPA. And so as we developed our schematic design for the park, we've also had to, come up with an operations plan and budget for it as well. Right now, the operations plan shows an operating deficit even in year one. And we've asked the community, do folks want us to redesign the park? The community seems extremely supportive of the existing design that was done by CMG Landscape Architecture. People do not want us to go back and redo the design. And so now it's a challenge of us working with the TJPA and our partners over at the East Cut Community Benefits District to figure out how we're going to cover this operating deficit. Again, the TJPA is the one that needs to feel comfortable with that budget. They will be responsible for any shortfall because they are going to be responsible ultimately for operating the park once it is complete. Again, OCII will develop it, will finance it, pay for its construction, but the TJPA will be the landowner and its operator. Just to give you all a timeline of what things look like once the TJPA really resolves this budget issue. We still have not entitled the park. Once the budget issue is resolved, it'll probably take about 2 months to take the schematic design package that we have ready forward to the OCII Commission for its approval and the park's entitlement. And then following its entitlement to get through design, permitting, bidding the project out to a contractor, and then getting through construction is a full 3.5 years. So, we're really looking at a timeline right now of that depends on resolving this this budget issue. And I know that we have participating tonight Andrew Robinson of the East Cut CBD, and Kathleen, if you can unmute Andrew, maybe, Andrew, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but if you wanted to add anything, we welcome that.
No, happy to be here, and thanks for everyone who's participating. So the East Cut CBD was trying to launch a fundraising effort for Underramp Park, really on the eve of shelter in place and COVID-19, quite candidly. We are looking to bring that back and address the funding gap between what the CBD currently has and other funds that have come through the park as revenue streams to address that gap. But it is, I would say it's of the utmost importance that we bring that park and its budget to a place where we can construct as soon as possible. And I would expect us to launch the fundraising campaign even before the end of this year, knowing that we're still sort of in the COVID-19 situation.
Thanks, Andrew.
Yeah.
Excellent. So Ben, another question for you. Just a quick update on what's happening with Block 2 and Block 4 developments.
Sure. One of the things that came up in Lizzie's presentation, and I actually took a quick view through the Q&A prior to us starting this session, is that Lizzie talked about connections between the park itself. In each of the schemes, there's connections between the Block 2 project and the Block 4 project. And one of the questions I had was, is this park essentially a privatized park for the benefit of the two bordering developments? And I want to make clear to everyone here, this is not a privatized park. If you missed my intro at the very beginning, I mentioned that OCII is a partner with San Francisco Recreation and Parks Department. They will own the final product. They will own this park. It is going to be a public park. Now, to the question of Block 2 and Block 4, OCII is currently in negotiations with a developer for the Block 4 site. We're working through a development agreement with a development party or a development team, and looking to wrap that up, hopefully, in the very near future. We've been working diligently on this for a while. Actually, with regards to Block 2, we have a request for proposals out on the street right now. Responses are due back, I think, in about another week. And then our housing team will go through those responses and begin the process of selecting a development team for that site. So the overall programming for the temp terminal site, these 3 blocks, is underway. And you can consider that, the development of all 3 of them is really underway. As soon as we select a team for block 2, they will immediately start working on a concept and schematic design for that project as well. And even though we're still in negotiations with block 4, we do have a preliminary schematic design that is not quite ready for public showing to the public, but almost there. And as soon as it's ready, we will be taking that to our Trans-Bay Citizens Advisory Committee, OCII-CAC. All right. I hope that answers the question. And I'm happy to take any follow-ups on that if I didn't.
Okay, thank you, Ben. So Lizzie, this is a question for you. There's quite a few questions regarding sun. Basically asking if we're taking in consideration of the angles of all the buildings, and how we've organized the spaces, and what activities you've placed in one area versus another, as like for the the playground area versus, say, the seating areas, for gathering spaces. If you could just kind of quickly go through maybe that same slide that you showed with the sun.
Sure. So obviously in San Francisco, sun is a desired element very much, and I'm sure downtown it's key. So most of the schemes did consider the sun. I mean, we all considered the sun. Again, the seating, usually you do want to place where people are actually sitting in sun belts. So for example, the clearing has this special little deck area. Over time, this whole meadow area is going, at midday is going to be completely in sun. One of the picnic areas are going to be in sun. Part of the playground at midday would be in sun. And by the end of the day, these picnic areas would be in sun. So play areas, as far as sun, you often want a mix of sun and shade. And this play area in particular is for younger kids. So there's always an interest to actually place playgrounds so they have a mix of sun and shade. And we place the playground exclusively on the southern edge, in part because of the adjacency of the nearby childcare. That's the main reason. And you can see in the clearing, very much the plaza is in the sun. And in the ripple, we have a mix of sunspots in these sort of more intimate seating areas. We have provided a pergola that over time, and a pergola is actually like very filtered sun. It's not dense. And again, this is something that can be designed to be, dissolve over time, so that as the trees grow, their sense of maturity happens, and this can actually become very open. And then in the lawn of the ripple, by midday, it's almost all in sun. So I'm not sure if I answered everything.
You are. It's definitely, there was a lot of just questions I think that may have came up before you even got to this slide in your presentation, but I thought it would be good to reiterate those
I see.
design thoughts that you put into place regarding the sun location and how it changes over the year. Another question, Lizzie and Ben, is what measures are being put in place to prevent damage from dogs, and is there an area for dogs, and what measures will be put in place to protect children from pets? That was another dog-related questions.
Lizzie, I think you're probably best equipped to answer this because it's design elements
Okay, sure.
that we would pursue.
Yeah, so this is, encouraged to be dog friendly, so you can walk your dog, and many of the planters that will be raised to protect it from dog But we do believe something like the Guy Place measure, where you actually provide amenities for dogs, could be included in any of the schemes. I know for particular, the clearing, this little edge was thought to be kind of an extension of the townhouse, where someone might want to go and take their dog just along this little walk on the edge. Yeah, that's, and we generally would protect the plants from dogs, because there generally is, damage to the plants when we don't, create some kind of planting barrier. And the children's play area themselves, it will be entirely fenced. So.
And another question regarding play areas. One respondent said that there were a lot of people answering the survey said they, didn't have children. So I'm not sure if this is, I'd have to look back at the survey, but he's saying 4 out of 5 respondents don't have children. So why the emphasis on kids? And I think this, Ben, you probably would be best answering that.
Yeah, it's a two-pronged answer. One, when OCII got started working on, the very earliest concepts for both Under Ramp Park and Trans Bay Park, or the Block 3 Park project, this one, we received feedback that a children's play area was absolutely desired in one of the park spaces. In the early concepts for Under Ramp Park, we had the children's play area or a children's park as part of that development or project. And in discussions between us and the TJPA and actually Caltrans, because you have overhead ramps at Under Ramp Park, right? That name literally comes because of the fact that you have the TJPA's 2 bus ramps that go into the new transit center. And then you have the Fremont Street exit ramp coming off the Bay Bridge above you, right? So both of those entities, Caltrans and the TJPA, didn't want to have the risk of a children's play area underneath those ramps. And so it was decided at that time that we would always include a children's playground in the Block 3 project. The challenge with releasing surveys, as we've seen, is that sometimes you get a very good cross-section of your community. Sometimes you get a certain subset of your community. In the past few years, as I'm sure many residents of the area have seen, or possibly even live in, many of the Trans Bay development blocks and towers have been completed. What OCII basically calls Trans Bay blocks 1 almost through 9. Many of the housing projects along Folsom are now done or nearing completion. And nearly all of those projects have affordable housing components. And what we find in our affordable projects is that you do have families with children that do need play space. And, that's one of the things that's lacking in this neighborhood. Many people, looked at the East Cut and the Trans Bay district as an extension of downtown early on. But as I just mentioned, we've delivered so many housing units that it's taken on a different shape at present. And we really need to try and service the needs of this growing community and its differentiating population. So I hope that addresses the question.
Thank you, Ben. So a question came up with homeless encampments and how we, within the design, are trying to incorporate design elements that might deter homeless encampments. And this might be a question that Ben, Andrew, and Lizzie can all chime in on.
I'll take the start in just that, we are in this early concept phase. We've unveiled these 3 concepts to you all tonight. And in OCII's early discussions with San Francisco Public Works, as well as Recreation and Parks, right? The question has come up as to whether or not the site would be fenced. At present, we haven't determined that, and I think that people are leaning away from that. Most of the city's parks, are not fenced, is my understanding, and we do have Stacy Bradley in this meeting as well, and she can add to that. But I just want to say that early on, I mentioned that, San Francisco Recreation and Parks will own the site. It will be a SF park. But I also added that some of the management responsibilities will be supported by the East Cut Community Benefits District. And one of the things that the East Cut CBD has is a roving security crew that moves through their benefits district every night. And so some of the thought is that as that security crew passes through the rest of the district, they would make regular passes around or even possibly through the park. Again, none of that has yet been solidified. We're at these early stages of determining what services will be provided by the East Cut CBD and how they will support the Recreation and Parks Department. But those have been some of the early discussions about it. And then Lizzie can speak to, the design elements that the team is considering to discourage homelessness kind of camping or sitting around. And then again, if Andrew wants to chime in or if Stacy wants to also add anything, I welcome their participation.
I'm not an expert in this, but we feel an active, alive park is the best deterrent to homelessness. But obviously, we'll probably be required to add with benches, make sure there's arm rests so that there can't be sleeping. We'll make sure there's clear views at all angles of the park, so there's no hidden corners. So even though some of these sites look luscious, we'll take into consideration visual queue lines so that people feel safe. Yeah, I guess I feel like a very activated, alive park is your best solution to the homeless issues. I'm sure Andrew has much more to say about this than I.
Yes, and I can imagine for a lot of folks listening in or watching this that the encampment that we're seeing at 110 Main Street between Howard and Mission is on people's minds. It really is, it's a credible challenge for the CBD right now. And with COVID and a reduction in shelter spaces and a lack of additional resources, either through the city or through other partners, we've really in a tough spot there. And I won't hide that. We have struggled with that. I hear from residents and constituents all the time about it. What I will say about this park, though, is that I do believe in coordination with Rec and Park and with the CBD's team, which is in the neighborhood 24 hours a day, that we can address quality of life issues sufficiently. We do have funding for this park. And I think that between the CBD team providing regular presence in the park, as well as overnight presence, and with the Rec and Park's Park Patrol, we can address these issues. I have a lot of confidence in it. I would say prior to COVID-19 and shelter in place, our neighborhood had a good success and track record in addressing these issues. We are in a particularly challenging moment right now.
All right, thank you very much, all three of you. And then Lizzie, I think piggybacking on that, can you review the lighting for the park and adjacent alleys and the widened sidewalks in Main and Beale, how well they'll be lit at night?
Yeah, sure. I mean, this is early on in the design, but certainly lighting will be a part of both the alleyways here and as well as within the park. And generally, with Rec and Park projects, we tend to use lamp posts, sometimes inbuilt seat wall, step lighting, kind of lower level lighting. So it would be a mix of those two kinds of lighting, but certainly lighting would be included in any and all of these schemes.
Okay, and then Lizzie, also the bathroom location on the sidewalk. What was the thought on, which street it would go on? There was a question concerning that.
Yeah, we have considered a couple options, but we have rested on Main being probably the best option for a bathroom location. Certainly in this street right away, in part because Beale has this bike lane right adjacent to the site, so it already carves up the sidewalk a little bit. So we feel the broadest and easiest place, the spatially, the Main Street location has the best opportunities. And again, we can, if there's a strong desire to have this deco, we can adjust any of these designs to have a deco.
Okay, thank you. And then Ben, a question in general about our original timeline versus our timeline now. Are there delays due to COVID?
We have experienced, I think, a slight delay in our original timeline, but not huge due to COVID. I mean, the original plan for desiring to have this community meeting was actually a little bit earlier in the summer. We're obviously at the end of summer, and so we're having this community meeting now. However, Kathleen, who was just asking the question of me, we've been working together with the design team to see where we can actually pick up some time that we've lost. And so, at the end of the presentation, I will go over the project schedule and lay that out. But we're a little bit behind, but we do believe that we can make that time up. So.
And then Lizzie, questions about the trees. So we show in one of the design options that we keep the palm trees, but is that an option in any of the other schemes? And if they're not used at this site, what will happen to the palm trees?
Yeah, good question. If there's a strong desire to keep the palm trees, I believe any of these three designs, we can incorporate them. They have to be retained one way or another within the city family. And this could be on another street. It could be in another park. We will keep these palms one way or another. It may not be on this site, but we intend to reuse them one way or another.
And there were a few questions, Lizzie, about the tree groves, and maybe you could just kind of compare the three schemes and the sort of the massings of trees.
Yeah, so I mean, I kind of mentioned this earlier that each of them I would say each scheme tries to create some sort of shield of sorts from the Beale Street side. So, probably, the Ripple has the most sort of organized tree system with kind of a la Bryant Park inspiration, where you could put seats underneath. The Commons also has a very large swath of green swords, but it would be kind of this notion of a mixed planting shrub tree experience that also carries throughout the site here and here. And the clearing also, I would say at the Tahama side is this notion of a mixed planting, and it's more organic in both the clearing on this edge and the Commons on this edge is trying to be a little less streetscape, but more naturalistic in its approach and mixing different species and heights.
And a question about global, in all the seriousness of global warming, can we consider more green areas? What are, if you could probably sort of just reiterate the green, how much green you have in maybe each of the schemes. Sure. Versus hardscape.
Yeah. I would say, the clearing got the biggest swath of overall green space, with the exception of this one sort of flexible hardscape, but each tries to sort of blend this notion of at least a large flexible space within some of these more intimate seating areas. So in the clearing, this is the more group-like seating areas that is a deck, and this is another hardscape. But otherwise, this is rich in lots of different landscape, what we call softscape. The Commons uses these sort of islands of landscape to frame the circulation and provide sort of more intimate pathways through the landscape on this edge. Probably, and this has the largest paving area, the Commons, with this more flexible plaza piazza concept. The Ripple is, again, more of a blend of the two, where you break up the paving with these sort of islands of landscape, that you create these zones where you can gather as a community in these smaller areas, with just sort of breaking the paving to allow for, again, these sort of community sort of seating zones. And then the edges are completely, framed by trees, almost in all the schemes.
And there was a specific question about grass. They're asking if in design 2, there appears to be no areas that would have grass, and they're asking for confirmation on that.
Yeah, I mean, there was a notion these lighter green areas are sort of meadow grass, but not like a lawn per se. That's true. And this is considered a meadow rather than a lawn. And this scheme is, we did hear that people wanted lawns, but we are trying to move away from that, concept, in part because ecologically lawns are not the greatest thing. They don't provide habitat. Of course, they are nice places to sit, but you do have issues around, lawn maintenance and keeping it up and making it look good. So that's why in the Ripple, we've done an elevated lawn to kind of manage the drainage and in a way to prevent the wear and tear that you would normally have in the lawn.
And Ben and Lizzie, another question about dogs. And one person asks if a small or smallish areas could be incorporated into any of the designs because there's so many dogs in the neighborhood.
I think, I'll take the first stab at it. I think that from the discussions that we've had internally as a development and design team and in our early conversations with Rec and Park, I believe a dog type of relief area could be accommodated in any of the schemes, correct, Lizzie? And I know that that's something that
for sure.
Our Rec and Park colleagues have asked us to really consider as far as adopting for this project, because I think that they see that as a need in almost all of their projects. But again, we do have Stacy on the line if she wants to try and address some of that question.
Sure. We do. We think this is a great place to incorporate some small elements to encourage dogs to go in certain areas and to help prevent dogs in areas that we don't want them to be. So we're working with the design team on how to make that happen. The under ramp park that we've been talking about will have a significant dog play area included. So we're hoping that as that will get built in the coming years, then that will be able to provide a very close space for dogs. But we definitely will continue to monitor the opportunities for how we can encourage dog use here and throughout the neighborhood.
Thanks, Stacy. And one thing I just wanted to add on to what Stacy said about Under Ramp Park for participants in the meeting who aren't super familiar with that design. Stacy commented that there is a large dog play area. To be explicitly clear about that, the dog play area at Under Ramp Park is nearly a block long. It's huge, and so it's both a play area and relief area. You would be able to toss a frisbee or a ball pretty darn far to your dog, and So we always envisioned having dogs do larger exercise at that site, but want to incorporate, the ability for people to take their dogs to this site, have their dogs relieve themselves and so forth. So those are things that we are exploring in the design.
And Lizzie and Ben, there was a question about if any of the three are more expensive than the other, if we're looking at all three designs and kind of comparing cost-wise.
I'll take that question. And so at this very early stage, we're just looking at all of the various concepts like OCI, we're not ruling anything out. And we feel comfortable with all three of the designs that we see here. We don't have any cost dollars attributed to any three of the schemes. And the reason for that is that these schemes or concepts are meant to elicit all of your interest and feedback, right? I think as Lizzie said earlier, people could select one of these schemes or the community could select one of these schemes. The community could also select, a combination of all of these elements that finally get rolled into one scheme. At the point that we have a concept design that the community wants us to move forward into what OCII and the design team refer to as the schematic design phase, going towards our entitlement, that's when we'll start really pricing the designs. But I think I said at the very outset of the meeting, OCII is financing this park, financing its development. And at present, when we reviewed all three of these schemes, we had no concerns about any of them or combinations of them. And we're not concerned about costs of delivering them at this time.
So Ben, a question came up. You had mentioned, that there's a child care center block in Block 2 that's being proposed. And the question is, can you talk more about how these public uses influence the park design?
When we say these public uses, are we referring to the child care center as a public use?
Yes, that's what I think they mean, yes.
Okay, I mean, at Block 2, there will be a child care center. That's what we do anticipate as being a key element of that project. But as a father of a young toddler who takes his kid to childcare every day, childcare centers are required to have their own on-site play area. So there has to be some form of a play area for kids on the Block 2 site. As I mentioned earlier, the community had communicated to OCII a long time ago the need for a children's type of playground in the district. We had once considered that at the Under Ramp Park project site. And, for reasons that don't work for, it doesn't work for the TJPA and it doesn't work for Caltrans, which own the ramps above that site. So we decided to locate that play area here. What I will say is that being that we have a child care center across the street, the design team has taken that into consideration. But certainly this play area is for the community. It's for the community's children. It is not exclusive as a use to the child care center that will be across the street. To be honest, though, there's another child care center that is in what we refer to as Transbay blocks or Block 7 across the street. It's across Beale. That is Natalie Gubb Commons. So on Beale between Howard and Folsom, there is another child care center there. They do have their own outdoor space for those children on site there. But I think all of the children in the district will benefit from the play area that we'd be adding to this space. And I hope that answers the question.
Thank you. And then,
Ben, can I just chime in? Sorry, just a little bit on that. We often get requests in this area for additional children's play areas. So it'll be great for us to be able to provide one. I also have little kids. I don't know if you can hear them screaming in the background, but one nice thing about having them located here is that as you walk through the area or from a child care space, you're able to use a space designed for kids, and that children's play areas and really do help to activate a site with positive use throughout the day.
Thanks, Stacy.
Thank you. Lizzie, can you go through the schemes and sort of show where you foresee people sitting to, have their lunch and gather with, a group of people once we can gather with a group of people. So basically eating, gathering spaces, and then are there any wind blocks so that people can sit comfortably in these spaces?
Sure. So the clearing has this deck zone that allows for seating all along at the edge and in the edge or the sort of center of the deck. And you can see it is somewhat nestled from the wind of sorts. I'm trying to think exactly how that wind is going to work. I think we did do an initial wind study, and I think the windiest spot is about here, but they're very preliminary, so we didn't really feel comfortable sharing them yet. And in fact, the edges are supposed to be sort of the quietest zones from the wind. So the edges along here. So, and this is a picnic area. So where you could meet with at least 3 fairly significant families and another picnic area. So that's in the clearing. And then, general large scale gathering, like exercise and stuff, could happen in this area. And there are some intimate seats, along the edges here and here. So that gives you a sense of the clearing. The commons is very much, so we are relying on the flexible seating and tables in this one. So there is generally flexible seating anywhere you want. You could sit along the pergola edge if you wanted to get out of the sun. These areas are definitely for, maybe at most 5 people, these little indents of communal seating here. Again here, and then individual seating can happen along the right. The idea of these are sort of raised planting areas that have built-in seating. And on the ripple, this is an area right here. There's a seating or gathering area of probably, you could gather about 10 people in this nook here, smaller nook there of, 5 or so. Then you have a bigger picnic zone in this area. And then this is the elevated lawn that you can gather within that elevated lawn. And these have little seat opportunities as well. So
thanks, Lizzie. So on the question, yeah, thank you. So on the question of lawn, I know there's been quite a few comments. One comment was when you're talking about grasses, are you thinking of native grasses in the meadow areas? And then there was a comment about asking whether you're considering fake grass in any location.
Well, take the fake grass. No, the fake grass we are not considering. So that's at this point in time, because really our goal is to encourage, habitat within all these landscape areas. This is really early in the scheme of things. We'd be working with Rec and Park to make sure we could, they're tough enough to endure sort of public moving about in the meadow, but the original idea was meadow grasses, whether they're native or whether they, at least attract habitat is probably our bigger goal, is our key element. So, and there's a lot of, we're far off from, getting into that detail, but generally we are trying to use appropriate, climate appropriate plants that do attract birds and bees, well, maybe not so much bees, insects, cross-pollination, all that kind of thing, to really enliven the space with birds and butterflies.
Okay, and I'll have a few other questions for you, Lizzie, but I think I'll switch it and ask Ben a question.
Thank you.
So give me a chance to drink some water. Ben, there was a question about the heights of the block 2, block 4 buildings, if you have some sort of rough ideas of stories, that number of stories.
Yeah, well, heights, it's a little bit easier for me to answer. Block 4, on the east side of that block, so the side of the block that faces Main Street, will have what we call Building A, and that's a 500-foot tower. So for some context, people in the neighborhood who are aware of Park Tower across the street, it would be similar in height to that. The west side of Block 4, at its, what we call the mid-rise building, that will top out at 165 feet. So, a 15, 16-story building. There's varied heights at Block 2, as low as, 50 plus feet for the townhomes, as high as 165 feet on the east side. So a taller mid-rise building on the east side of Block 2 and a shorter building on the west side. And I want to just, I've heard questions, throughout the Q&A period about sun, how much sun will access the Block 3 site. And the heights for Blocks 4 and 2, when the redevelopment plan was enacted or adopted, we took into consideration at that time, how much sun exposure we wanted to get to this site. So the heights for the 2 bordering developments had that in mind from the get-go. So I don't want people to think when they hear certainly a 500-foot tower, right, that's going to add increased shade or less sun. All of the sun studies that Lizzie showed during the presentation are already taking into account the predicted or prospective heights for the bordering blocks.
So I think we've gone over our time. We were going to end at 7, but we did get a lot of really great questions. And just for those questions that were not answered, there's only maybe 1 or 2. I think we've captured, hopefully, answered your question in some of the other similar questions. And then we'll make sure that we answer all of these and post them along with the presentation on our website. And then I think we could end the question and answer period, Ben.
Yeah, we can. I think that's fine. And we'll just need Lizzie to move on to the next pages so I can close things out for folks. So just let's go over the project schedule really quick. I know that there was some questions about that, whether the project's delayed. We're currently in the concept planning phase. Again, once we get through settling on a concept later this fall, settling a concept with the community and getting community support for one concept to move forward, the design team and development team will move into what's called schematic design and aiming towards our entitlement, which could happen, depending on how long it takes to finish off the schematic design. We're looking at late spring of next year or early summer. And then following the entitlement, you move into, your construction documents development. Once that's done, we have to permit the project and do the bid award to a contractor. And then we're expecting a 2-year build time for the project itself. And so it could be delivered as early as late 2024 or very, very early 2025. As far as the outreach schedule in this phase, the concept phase, again, we had community meeting 1 in March where we did information gathering. We are at community meeting 2 right now. And then we expect to be back in front of you all in short order time later this fall with this design refinement where our design team will take all of the feedback that they get from tonight's questions, as well as you guys all responding to the surveys that you'll have access to following the meeting. We also have done public surveys after, the previous design meeting. So after every single design outreach meeting, we do surveys. And then next slide, Lizzie.
Oh, sure.
Thank you. And so that does bring us to the close of tonight's meeting. I just want to thank all of you who are still here for your attendance, for the questions that you asked, and for the feedback that you've provided thus far. At the very top of this screen, you'll see the Public Works website. That is the location for all information on this parks project. That is also the location for accessing the survey if you don't want to take it immediately following this presentation. And if you need to connect with an actual person, Kathleen, my colleague, her contact information is right here on your screen, both an email for her as well as her phone number. And then if we can scroll down a little bit more, Lizzie, to the next slide.
So
I
the
think
next
that's
slide.
it, right?
Yeah,
I think
that's it.
So when we close this Zoom meeting for all of you attendees, again, the Zoom meeting window should close for you all, but you should get redirected to a link on your web browser that will take you directly to go to the survey if you want to fill that out now. Again, you can go to the San Francisco Public Works Block 3 Park website to access the survey there if you want to think about things and what you've seen tonight. We will be posting this recording at the Block 3 website on Public Works' website. So we'll make that available following the meeting for people who missed. You can tell your friends or neighbors in the area that they can watch this. And then again, you can also access the survey from there. So thank you all very, very much for your participation tonight. We hope you've liked what you've seen, and we look forward to your feedback. And I just want to thank Lizzie for her great presentation, and we'll be back in touch with you all soon.
Yes, thank you.
All right.